Morning, everyone. It's Mark here from Logie Timber. We often get questions about the types of machinery that we have here at the sawmill. So we thought we would do a series of videos, starting with this one, which is the Trakmet Sawmill, the first machine we ever bought, just to introduce you and talk a little bit about the specs and the types of machinery that we have here at the sawmill. This is a Trakmet TTS 1200. It's a 1200 because it will cut 1.2 meters wide between the guide blades, and we think it will do about 6.5-ish meters. We have had slightly longer logs on it, but it's a bit of a faff. So 6.2 seems to be the longest we kind of do on a regular basis. So we bought this mill. This is the very first machine we actually bought when we set the company up. So we bought the mill, put it in place, pretty much exactly where it is now, and then built the whole shed around it. So everything around the whole building here was manufactured and milled on this mill. We were right from the beginning, and all the timber came off of the estate. So we bought this back in 2017, so it's over 8 years old now. And it's been pretty much used every working day ever since, and it's still going strong. I mean, it really hasn't let us down much at all. A few things, a few sort of things here and there that we've had to replace and repair. But on the whole, it's been an amazing investment. I think at the time, this is testing the memory, but I think it was around about £25,000–30,000 to buy. We had a little bit of help at the start from Scottish Forestry to help towards the purchase of this. But as an investment for like 8 years, pretty much of solid work, for about 25–30 grand. It's an amazing investment, amazing bit of machinery. And we had a few extra upgrades on the mill when we bought it. So we added in an extra log turner. So we've got 2 log turners on the mill to be able to turn really long logs. We've also got 2 hydraulic clamps, so you can clamp the log in separate places. When dealing with larch, because larch is so bloody bendy and a pain in the arse, you have to have those good clamps to hold it in place and keep it stable. We also added on 2 rollers. So the rollers, you've got one at the front and one at the back, and they allow us to level out the log and level out the board. So that sometimes when you're cutting really big tapered logs, you need to lift the front of the log up so that you end up with a nice straight cut when you turn the whole thing over. The front roller is powered, meaning that we can move the log forwards and backwards on the mill, which is super handy because when you're loading the log onto the mill with a forklift, sometimes you don't quite get it exactly in the right spot. So you can use the hydraulic controls, move it forwards, backwards, instead of having to take the log off and put it back on again as a pain in the arse, just saving time. So what else? We have 2 different types of blades that we run. We have an X-cut blade, which is a swage blade. So every tooth is slightly offset, and one of the teeth has got a tip on it. We use that mainly for cutting hardwood. They're cheaper. They're about 80 quid-ish a blade. Which means that they're a little bit more expendable. If you're cutting hardwood, it's so likely that we're going to hit stone or something in it, just because of the nature of the timber. It's so gnarly. Whereas when we move on to softwood, we move to a full stellite tip blade that we get from Ernest Bennett, and those are a bit more expensive. They're about 150 to 180 quid plus VAT a blade. But they cut about 3 times as fast. They last about twice as long, and they just give us a far, far better cut on the softwood. One of the other key features that we added in is the debarker. Because we don't peel any of our logs, the logs come onto the mill with the bark on, so they're still full of stone and grit. And if you didn't have a debarker, you would just run through blades so quickly. Because the job of that machine is that little blade at the front there, this bit here, spins that direction, so it spins in the opposite direction of its travel and skims off all the bark and all the rubbish just in front of the blade and no more, so it only cuts off the thickness of that saw. So it just keeps a really nice clean path when the blade goes into the log, just massively increases the duration and the longevity of your blade. But one of the key points of getting right on this mill is getting the correct guide block pressure and guide block material. We went through loads of different types, and we ended up settling on this stuff here, which is Tufnol. We've tried a couple of different things. This one is Chaco, which has got an impregnated lubricant in it. It's really, really expensive, and I don't think it works that well. We tend to find that it wears out quite quickly. I don't know if you can see that on there. It wears out quite quickly. The blocks get really tapered, and they end up kind of melting a little bit on here. So Tufnol seems to be the golden standard. We buy it in, I think they're about 75 or 80 mil strips, and just cut it down to size, put the holes in it, and off it goes. It's pretty cheap, pretty easy to fix, and lasts for ages. One of the key things we have is because we do a lot of larch, is getting the lubrication on the blade working really well. We made a commitment at the start when we set up the business to only use Scottish timber and to use no chemicals whatsoever in any process that we do. So we run a plant-based lubricant, and it's a company called Plant Oil, and it sits in a tank up the top there. The guys just fill it up and you mix it. I think it's 20-1, depending on what they're cutting, but 20-1 is a normal. And you just measure, keep the flow rate correct with the dial there. If you're cutting really sappy larch, you add a little bit more. If you're cutting hardwood, you can taper it down a little bit more. So it's an amazing lubricant, and you've just got to make sure that you keep the blade really nice and wet to stop the sap of the larch clogging up the blade, which makes the blade wander and ends up causing you all kinds of headaches. Just as the main station that the sawmill operator stands at, some of the other smaller sawmills that you get, the operating station's actually attached to the head of the mill, and you have to walk backwards and forwards. But considering the amount of cutting that the guy's having to do in a day, you would clock up like marathon distance if you were doing that. So we went for the static saw station. So the guys are based here. All the controls are here for the main saw height. And then all of the hydraulic controls are all on the bottom here. So we've got everything can be controlled from this station. So the operator doesn't have to move. He keeps all of his tools here, wedges when we're doing a lot of hardwood or big heavy duty Douglas fir or larch. Sometimes it's beneficial just putting a wedge into the back, just to keep the cut a bit more open. When the blade's going through, it stops it pinching. And larch is really prone for that. The tablet here has all of the work that the guy's on for the day. So this is the interaction that we have. So the office schedule the work order, put it onto the tablet for each of the stations, comes through here, he can see what he's doing, and then signs it off via a form. All of the tools that he needs, control of the lubrication system, and then all of the other spares and repairs and tools and things, all nicely labeled up and all has its place. Okay, so we only operate this machine with one person. However, it's almost a 1.5 person job, and I say that because when the log is on the mill and the blade's actually cutting through the log, the other person doesn't need to be there. But the unloading of all the boards into a stack like this takes a lot of effort on your own, and it's so much faster with two people. We often talk about this value and non-value added tasks in sawmilling. And the only time we're adding value is when the product is changing. So that's effectively only when the saw blade is in the log and cutting. So anything outside of that is non-value added, and we want to refine that and keep it as small and as short as possible. So having an extra person here helping to unload means that the sawmiller can get back to cutting through that log much quicker. In the ideal world, we would have someone just here waiting for that, but it doesn't often work that way. We did have, before we put in the new saw line, we had another process that when the boards came off and they had these double weiny edges on them, they would then go through an edger. So an edger would allow you to cut, and it would have two circular saw blades or whatever the configuration was, two circular saw blades that would cut these double weiny edge boards down to the width. And that was a lot faster because the mill is just concentrating on cutting through and through. It's just cutting, flipping the log, cutting again. The boards are being stacked to one side and then run through the edger. So that's definitely the way that we saw the biggest production. We mainly use the mill now to cut bespoke post and beam orders and hardwood. So if you order a bespoke post and beam or something unusual, very likely going to come from this side. And the reason we still keep doing that is it's a little bit more gentle on the log and on the beam this side. The sawmiller can have a much more accurate handle on what he's doing rather than on the full production mill, that the logs go in one end and boards come out the other. And it's a little bit harsher on the material sometimes, and we just need to keep that machine cutting cladding. So most of the bespoke stuff comes from here. So we don't end up with a huge amount of this double weiny edge stuff anymore. So we got rid of the edger, and when we make up these packs, then we put it across to the other saw line. But if I was starting fresh again, one of these with a small edger, logger saw, wood miser, they do these smaller edgers, would be the perfect combination. And we're aiming on an average day to cut around 2 cubic meters of sawn timber a day on here. If you had an edger and you was 2 of you running it, you could probably get to 3, maybe even 4 if you were really quick. We also put in a Stenner resaw a while back, so that the mill was just cutting blocks, passing it over to the Stenner, and that would cut the cladding. That was a lot faster. We were doing sort of 400 boards a day, somewhere around there on an average for that one. But yeah, as a starting out, mill, edger, you can't go wrong. I hope that video was pretty useful. We're going to continue to do a few more of these with all the machinery in the yard. So starting off on the Trakmet. We're probably going to go over to the old PU saw, just a bit of a contrast next. But we also offer weekly tours of the sawmill, run by Rob, our sales manager, which is on a Wednesday afternoon, I believe. So if you want to come up and see these things firsthand, actually speak to the guys that are operating these machines day in, day out, and see where your timber is being created, go onto our website and you can book onto a tour and come up and see. If you've got any other comments or questions about this machine or anything else that we do here, please just drop it in the comments below and we'll get back to you straight away.